The Business Simplicity Podcast, where leaders share their most successful strategies and the failures that inspired them, so business owners and managers can avoid the suffering and reap the benefits. With your host, Chris Parker.
And we're back with the Business Simplicity Podcast. This is Chris Parker, and I'm having a conversation with Jyotish Patel, who is what I call an energy coach, and he is actually my energy coach. But we'll get into a little bit more about what he does and why he does it. I'm actually fascinated about this conversation because we haven't really discussed too much up front on where we're going to go. And every time I have a conversation with Jyotish, it's revealing, can be confronting, but it's always nurturing and contributing to growth. So really looking forward to this. So Jyotish, thanks for joining. Can you kick us off with just an introduction? What is it that you do?
Great, thank you. So primarily, Chris, I'm a healthcare practitioner. So I have a clinical practice locally and also in London. I live in the UK, where I see individuals that may have some health challenges, and it can range from someone wanting to manage stress up to some more challenging health issues, terminal challenges. So work in that whole spectrum. And my specific specialty, or my love and passion, is energy medicine. So we view the body as a system, and it's an energy system. And so how we work with them is to see where the imbalances are, through some physical testing, through some conversation dialogue, and bring the systems into balance, to jumpstart the natural healing capacities that we all have. So the body, the healing is coming from within. So that's at the heart of my work, is empowering individuals in clinical practice and also in facilitation of groups. Leadership programs on wilderness trails is to empower, hold, and support people to remember and awaken, really, of what it is to be human, and to help us navigate through the human conditions, the challenges of the human experience, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, whether it's in the workspace, in our relational space. So that's at the heart of what I do, Chris. And it's connected to direct experience. So it's about working somatically, working physically. Because what my learning insight's been is that's a part, it's probably kind of the last frontier for human evolution, because we've explored the mind and the academic, scientific rigor around understanding life, and we all of that, and not to make any of that wrong, but it's like, what's the piece? Because given that we know what we know and what we have access to, how do we still find ourselves in a world that's quite challenging, painful? And so I think we can tap into more, we can be more fully resourced by dropping from the head into the heart, into the gut, into the whole body system, and begin to glean into some of that intelligent wisdom and use that to support our well-being, primarily our evolution, our growth, and any area of our life, but most of my time now is in clinical practice, facilitating retreats and leadership. So working with organizations. I'm an affiliate with several leading consultancies. And so we facilitate leadership programs in that space. Yeah. So that's in a nutshell, Chris.
I'd like to dive in a little bit to the connecting this energy medicine and corporate leadership a bit. But before we go there, when you talk about energy, can you the best you can define that a bit? Because we're not talking about, or maybe we are, like energy from a power socket. This is a different dimension of energy. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Good question, Chris. Yeah. So think. I mean, again, it's like, I think if we look at ancient wisdom, wisdom traditions, they spoke about energy, and what they meant with that was that beyond physical matter, we're actually frequency vibration. And that's what we mean by energy. So, and that's been validated now. It's measurable that we're actually a vibration, a frequency. It's like if you look at the physical body and you put it under a large microscope, what we'll find that the spaces in between the atoms, the particles, the molecules is far greater than the particles themselves. So we're actually 99.9% space. Right? And so and it's not tangible, right? But I think we all, as human beings, we have the capacity to connect with that and get a sense of what that actually means. Simply from, it's like when you're in an environment, you can sense beyond what's going on. So that's what we mean by energy, and more recently, I think that it's got a lot of kind of it's more in the mainstream domain. I think people are becoming more aware of it. It started off in the therapeutic world, in therapy, with acupuncture, with shiatsu, with practices like yoga, tai chi. All of that practices talk about energy, chi, prana. So that's what we mean by energy, Chris.
I was triggered recently in the visit to Cairo, where we had a very academic Egyptologist lady guiding us today, and when she was talking about the ancient Egyptian religion, if you will, in their pantheon of gods, what I was really fascinated by was their, how did she describe it, that the connection to prosperity was through, I think she used the word fusion with light, with the light, as in that's of course is their god Ra, of those three gods, representing the day. And when I kept pressing her on, well, how did they achieve fusion? Basically what it came back down to was meditation. And this is okay, then thousands of years old. And is this what we were talking about? Is that calming of the inner vibration that I guess we can all feel? I guess we can feel when we're troubled. We can feel when we're stressed, when we're anxious, or when we're calm and peaceful. And is that the path that you're sharing or showing?
Yeah, exactly. So we all have a frequency that we resonate at, right? And that's usually determined by how we interact with our environment or our physical health and well-being. And what we seek in the practices we do, that can come through meditation, it can come through body work, it can come through connecting with nature. There's many ways of doing that. But is to create coherence, alignment in that resonance. So we become fully resourced, right? So, and again, it's like we can bring it down to, when we feel off, it's like if we experience an emotion, it could be sadness, it could be anger, it could be grief, it can be joy, it can be any of those emotions, but all of those emotions actually at the heart are a frequency and vibration. And we know that through myriad of emotions, those emotions make us physically respond in a different way, right? Not just necessarily our own, but also people that are around us if somebody's down and having a bad day, we kind of begin to feel that, pick up on that, right? And so the practice of energy medicine, the other practices we talked about, are essentially designed, and they go way back of how do we create a resonance and alignment. And it's not necessarily that's the place where we need to hang out. The optimum state is begin empowering ourselves to be able to track that, right? Because in our daily lives, through distraction, through the challenges that we face every day, we get thrown off, right? I mean, that's part of the human condition. And I think the mastery is how to begin to recognize that, not to make it wrong or to stand on judgment of that, but to be aware of that when we're off, we're not at our best, right? An example would be in a family situation. It's like if I've had a difficult program, I've been away and I'm traveling and I'm working and I come home and I'm not in coherence when I come home. It's like the way I respond with my daughter, with my partner, with the animals is different if I'm come back and I'm in a good state where my energies are elevated, I'm feeling I'm in coherence, right? So, and I think when we talk about somatic practices, it's about paying attention to those subtle signals that we all know, right? And I think partly what we've done is we've lost connection with that, right? Because it's like we've kind of glorified the mind, and we try and think our way out of situation and go into the head, which is useful to a point, right? To make sense of things, but more importantly, the feelings, the emotions, the body felt experience is what the work's about. Because that's our first impulse, that's our first response if we're confronted with anything, whether it's leadership, family situations, relationship. Is like we feel it in the body, right? That's the first response, and then our tendency or default will be try and jump into there and try and make sense of it, right? And when we do that, I think partly we disconnect, so we get disembodied, and we stop feeling, right? I think this is the key, really. If we talk about energy medicine or emotional intelligence or our connection to nature, it's a whole body experience, right? So
now, for people that are checking into the Business Simplicity podcast, talking about energy medicine and connection to nature might be unexpected. However, my observation, and I'm curious what your reaction to this is, there's a convergence happening, I feel, because I was introduced to you by, one of the top strategy consultants that I know, business strategy consultants, hardcore business strategy stuff, and made the connection here. And then I've heard from you that through other, top international consultancies, you're brought in to bring, leadership teams and boards through nature walks through, Norway. And the, my belief is that the sort of the management science that we've been espousing and failing with the last, whatever 100 years, that people are machines, and if they simply sit in their box and don't talk back and do what they're told, profits and productivity will increase. But that seems to continuously fail us. We're not agile, we're not responsive, people are burned out, people quit, they're disenfranchised. How do you see the world of energy medicine and organizational leadership converging these days? What do you see happening?
Yeah, and I think that the key is in what you shared about, like, we kind of treat organizations as machines, right? With input and output. But I think what it is like organizations are made up of individuals. They're made up of human beings, of people, you know, who have a mind, body, and a soul. So if you look at organizations, they're actually living systems, right? So they hold an energy. So they're living, breathing systems, and I think that's kind of the next stage of our evolution in terms of how we organizations. If we begin to see them as living, breathing organizations, and begin to work with that, right? I think we can still do all of the stuff that we do in business, but it brings an element, but it brings humanity back to business. And if we look at organizations, in a sense, we have a tendency to gravitate towards organizations because it represents communities. Right? So if we track back, we evolved as communities. Human beings evolved in communities. And in the recent past, we've lost that. You know, we kind of gone into the world of kind of individual and separation and fragmentation. Why we gravitate towards organization and why they represent communities for us, I think, is we have natural human tendencies and impulses, you know, which are part of our continuum process, right? And so there's always a need in human beings to connect, right? That starts from day one. As soon as we're born, we're seeking for safety, we're looking for connection. And out of that connection, we're looking for co-creation, right? And to be part of the whole, right? So these are natural tendencies and they're part of our human evolution. And in a sense, organizations represent those elements for us. Unfortunately and sadly, I think what's happened is those are the very things that we seek, which is safety, connection, co-creation. All of this have been stripped away from business models, right? Because of, again, it's not to make it wrong. I think it served us for a period of time, but we're at a point in time now where we begin to see that it comes at a cost, right? It comes at a cost to human health, cost to our relationships, comes at a cost to the planet, right? So it's not sustainable. And I think there's a natural evolution now where we're beginning to say, well, how do we bring meaning and purpose back to work, right? And journey together as human beings, as a collective in organizations. And that requires, I think, rethinking, reinventing the models that we operate within, of what it means to do business, what it means to be a human being, what it means to be a leader, in a bigger context. So we start thinking systemically. And what happens in the work that we do, Chris, is that what we bring to an organization where we're seeking those things, those natural human impulses, are also connected to our family systems, right? Because that's where we develop our perception of what it is to be in a system. And so what happens is it kind of helps us to track back our journey of who we become through our experience from day one, in a sense, right? So what we see through these programs, you know, whether it's out in wilderness training or one-on-one coaching, is that our kind of leadership journey in organizations is directly connected to our personal journey, right? We cannot separate them, right? So when you bring those two together, individuals, groups, teams bring the best of themselves, and that's about deep healing, and it's usually connected to our initial life experiences, or we can call it trauma.
I think in the last months I've made that statement a bit even more directly, that a company or an organizational journey is simply the combination of the individual's journeys. That there isn't anything beyond that life journey of the individuals that are checking into it. And what I find is that when organizations don't see it that way, and expect people to behave and be treated like, pieces of a machine, and then those people become angry or frustrated or stuck, then we tend to point to those people and say those people have a problem. And I don't necessarily think that is exclusively true. Meaning, if you talk about mental health, if you torture someone for years and that person snaps and goes crazy, then is it really that person's mental health that we're talking about, or is it the collective? And again, it's not a black or white, left or right, true or false thing, but if you're perhaps a more traditional leader and who are listening this far into this conversation and they're a bit triggered, and that person wants to take a more energetic view, perhaps at their own style, their own management style, their own practices, their beliefs, where could they start? So what is something that you could recommend as a starting point, or for someone to make this connection in their organization to the betterment of the individuals on their journeys, and then also, of course, the outcomes of the company?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, so I think there are many ways into the same place, and traditionally, I think how people have managed this is through coaching, through business coaching, right? Which is that has a business relevance and also aims and objectives for the business and their leadership styles. Working with profiling systems and various ways of it. But I think where we're at now is that you cannot take the healing out of it, right? We're all possible humans, right? In a sense, it might sound a bit harsh, but we're broken, right? I mean, that's a great starting point, and not from a place of judgment, but just recognizing that part of the human journey is to evolve through the challenges that we confronted with. But I think the key is to, whatever we experience, as a leader, whatever stage of your career you're in, it's always a reflection of what happened in our formative years, right? So that's the journey. And I think that may be the piece that may be missing in terms of how we evolve individual leadership, personal challenges,
If I can jump in on that, I think you started with coaching, and I as you know, I think leadership coaching is great. However, oftentimes I see the executives saying, go coach them. Don't worry about me. Go work on everyone else and get them to behave differently. And what I'm and this is a lot of the work that we've been doing, so it's not surprising. What I hear you say is actually that executive needs to first look within and heal within themselves before they can do anything with anyone else. And again, this is connecting to the point that an organization journey is simply and ultimately and only the collection of the individual journeys, including that executive.
Yeah.
So how would they do that? Meaning, it's not obvious at the start on how to heal.
Yeah. I think, first of all, I think what it requires is awareness is key, right? Having an awareness that this part of myself as a leader or as an individual, as a human being, let's say, is always seeking healing. He's always seeking to come into wholeness, right? And so it requires, I think, deep honesty in terms of checking in on who we become, how we interact, how we engage in our relationships, right? And also being open to feedback. I think that's key, right? To with the people that are around you, family members or team members, to see where you may need attention, right? And then seeking out program. I mean, there's a myriad of things out there, programs, individual coaches, healers that can support you in that journey. But it is working with another. It's a practitioner journey, so it's not something that we can read about and evolve. Then that may include body work. My personal passion is body work, and also empowering people with practices to go on their own journey, right? So become more conscious, become more aware, and kind of actualize and awaken our full potential, So there are many ways into that. I mean, there's so many leadership programs now. And also nature, wilderness trails, I'm part of a collective that we take leadership teams into nature, into wild nature, in all kinds of terrain. So it can be Arctic, it can be rainforest, it can be desert. And what happens in those situations, through the experience, it can be a 3-day, 5-day journey, is once we start making that connection to nature, that gives us a different insight into what our true nature is and what gives us meaning and purpose. But those journeys, I think more and more people are now beginning to resonate and connect with nature through our experience in COVID, and we're finding more and more that work is really becoming more and more popular in the leadership space. So it's and about what I feel, Chris, is like, I'm going to say this now. It's like, once you make a commitment and you're ready, what you need will show up. Right? Either a practitioner, a healer, a coach, a program will show up. It's almost like what we need is always there, right? But I think it's asking the right questions, it's having the right inquiries, having the right curiosity about what's my next step. Right? And if you're feeling any kind of dissonance, disillusionment, lack of energy, apathy, anything that doesn't make us feel good, then we're off track. Right? That can be the feedback loop. Because it's our birthright to feel joy, to feel vital, to have the capacity to connect, right, and create and co-create and innovate. And when we derail, we also have the capacity to get back on track. Right? That's innate. But I think what it is about, it's about initiating conditions in our own environment, in our own organizations, for that to happen. So it's not so much kind of prescriptive way of it, but how do we collectively initiate conditions where we allow those natural human impulses to arise, right? And how to collect it. Because I think, one thing is for sure, that whoever you're challenged with in your organization, right, whether it's peer or a senior or somebody that you supporting, they're there for a reason, right? Because they're mirroring something back to you. right? But once you start on that journey, it really becomes clear that life's a teacher. The individuals that come into our lives are teachers. All right. So I think it's partly requiring a shift in mindset, in perspective. And it's an inner journey. It's not out there. In a sense, there's no out there. What's out there is a reflection and a creation of what the inner game is.
Well, for me, as you very well know, over the last year or so, I made the choice to own my emotions. And this happened even before we met. So it's probably over the last couple of years. And that experiences that resulted in anger or frustration or some fear-based reaction, which we all have. And the tendency is then to point to someone else and say, okay, well, that person made me angry. Well, it's not possible for someone else to make you angry. It's, other people can do things, they can behave. And then actually the emotion and the reaction is completely within me. And that's a profound and daunting realization. Oh, wait a second. This is down to me. And sometimes, as you shared, that inner healing work from it might be even unconscious, subconscious from the past or previous things, or and then shining the light on that is fascinating, and finding out how much of that is locked within yourself. And I would even state that if an organization has been operating together, and if it's a combination of individual journeys, if that whole collective group are in a state of stress or angst, then they will have locked that stress and angst into their organization as well, into their practices, their cultures, their behaviors. And sometimes I imagine that would be hard to break that stuff down, transform that, because if one person starts to transform, then they could find themselves in a different place. Maybe they're able to cope better, or maybe they realize they just need to go to find a different place. But it's whether they stay or go, I guess, is not the point. The point is, are they progressing on their journey? So, yeah, lovely. I loved what you said about, and it reminds me of some, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. It's another way that I've heard that saying before. And it was through our work that, you reintroduced me to Dr. Joe Dispenza, and delightfully looking forward in the near future to go over to London for an advanced retreat. Simply working within, and again, they don't teach this stuff at the MBA schools, as far as I know. Not to this level of depth, but I do remember I got my MBA was at Nyenrode here in the Netherlands, and we had a corporate strategy track, and it was highly intellectual, analytical, except for the very last lecture. In the professor, and I still remember to this day. The last lecture was him sort of sitting in the middle with a glass of wine. And he said, basically, so we've taught you all of these methods, these metrics, these practices. He said, but at the end of the day, you probably just need to sit and reflect and also listen to your intuition. And I think the fact that message, it wasn't practicing meditation or something. I think you could go much deeper, but just the fact that that there was an acknowledgement of the intuition, the power of the intuition, I thought was quite brilliant.
Yeah. And I think partly when you start on this journey, and we're all on the journey anyways, is that kind of accessing other intelligence. Yeah. So like I said earlier on, we've kind of put a lot of weight and kind of glorified the mind, the academic understanding, but then also there's sensing, there's intuiting, there's knowing, right? And these are our birthright to own those intelligences. And once we awaken those, it's like whatever we're challenged with, we can be fully resourced with other ways of knowing, right? Because the only way, the default way is to try and think our way out of it, right? But if we kind of begin to drop from the head into the heart, the heart has its own intelligence. And now we also know, scientifically, the gut also has intelligence, And so there are other intelligences that we can tap into that can inform us about our health, well-being, about life, about creation, right? And how to organize ourselves in businesses in a bigger context where we kind of every individual in the organization is evolving, and the byproduct of that is the organization grows, right? And it's a place where people look forward to coming, right? So and growing together, right? And we have that sense of humanity is evolving, right, through our input. Because organizations are big, right? They have a lot of influence how we live our lives, how we organize ourselves. So also that's my deep passion. If we can affect change at an organizational level, sometimes it's more effective than political change, because we're touching more people
and touching them in their real lives and in their today. So, well, Jyotish, we're coming to the close in our conversation. Not our conversation, because our conversation will continue, but at least for the podcast conversation. If people have been listening to this and are feeling that, whatever it is that's stuck in their organization, I think the invitation here is to look within to see what might be stuck within you in as a way. And I love that message, because if all the people in an organization look within themselves to heal first, then, well, the chance of us needing to look to, point at someone else and expect them to change on our behalf, I think that will diminish greatly, because of course that will never happen. And that would be, you'll always be disappointed if you need someone else to change their behavior in order to improve your own internal emotional state. That's just an unworking thing. So if anyone's triggered on this, again, it's Jyotish Patel, Jyotish Patel, Patel.com. He's based in the UK. But outstanding. Jyotish, thank you so much for the time, for the insights. And I think what I'd like to do is wrap up with the question, meaning my question would be, do people agree that, and then I'm curious what your question would be, Jyotish, do people agree that an organization's journey is only the sum of the individual journeys? I think that's something I would put out there and see if people are responding to that. So if you have an answer to that, look it up on LinkedIn, and let us know if you agree or disagree with that. Jyotish, would you have a different question than that, or does that work for you?
No, that's a great. That's the question. That's at the heart of it, and then also it becomes a systemic. So it gives. So we shape the system shapes us, right? And so the system is also informing you. The collective is informing you. So, and also you're having input. So having a bigger context. So systemic awareness, and then that can expand into many systems. But I think that's a great question to sit with, inquire, and get curious about. Is like whatever's in the way. And there's a beautiful quote. I think it's Margaret. Can't remember her second name. Her quote is beautiful. It's like, what's in the way is the way.
Yeah. Margaret Wheatley, maybe? I don't know.
No, I think it's Margaret. I know Margaret Wheatley. She's an amazing woman. work on leadership, but there's somebody else. Can't remember exactly.
What's in the way
is the way. Yeah.
Beautiful. On that, Jyotish Patel, thank you so much. It's been delightful.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much, Chris, for the invitation, and to all the listeners. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Download the Simplicity Toolkit from ebullient.com to discover the power of the Simplicity Scan and Sprint. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player.